And we want to welcome you for joining us today. We have a guest presenter that I'm going to tell you about here in a minute, and she's going to share with you some very practical things you need to know about mitigating HR risks in 2021. My name is Michelle Mott, and Dana Miller and I worked with Inspiring Solutions, a company that I started back in 1991, up until this past year. And we've been doing webinars to basically give some folks a dose of monthly motivation, staying positive in a negative world, giving you exposure to one of our inspiring programs or products. And over the past year, we are delighted to have merged with another company, JER HR Group, that have offices in New York and North Carolina. So we're still in Iowa, but we do work with clients around the country. In the area of everything from talent development, strategic planning, and a variety of HR consultations. And recently, we had the privilege of working with an organization, Dynamic Consulting Solutions. And we formed a partnership, and we're going to talk about how we have aligned with their HR toolkit. But today, I'm going to turn it over to Megan Richardson because she has more than 10 years experience working in human resources. I heard her earlier this morning calling herself an HR geek. I can know that she could probably fill the day with her knowledge. She has worked with multiple businesses in a variety of different states. And I know with HR compliance, that's a very dynamic and continuously changing role. And she works with organizations to help their organizations exceed their workplace goals and shape their culture. She's a seasoned trainer and consultant who leads multi-state management courses, leadership initiatives on policies and procedural. She's a sought-after speaker at both the national, state, and local level. She's from and lives in Jacksonville and has worked with the SHRM HR professionals. And I understand that she's got 2 fabulous children who love her homemade mac and cheese. So I am going to turn it over to Megan and give you.
Thank you so much, Michelle. I appreciate that. And my children only eat half the time. I don't know if when I can convince them to do so, usually by bribery. I don't know if anybody else is experiencing that, but that's pretty common in the Richardson household. All right, everybody. Well, thank you again so much for joining us today. The purpose of today's webinar is going to be to talk about those best practices that we can all employ to mitigate risk and stop potential issues before they start, right? That's the best way that we can tackle things, is to be proactive as opposed to reactive, right? We want to get ahead of those issues before they become issues. And then kind of hand in hand with that is going to be discussing the federal and state requirements to kind of drive those decisions that we make and what is deemed best practices. So first things first, I think I skipped over one. Top key 7 areas is what we're going to go over today. We only have half an hour. If you, I know I've got current clients on the phone as well as some folks who have never heard me speak. For those of you who don't know me, I like to talk a lot. We are not going to end with any time left on the clock with this presentation, I absolutely guarantee you. So I had to narrow it down to 7. I couldn't fit all 10 in there. Top 3. Remaining 3 possibly to come in a later webinar. There's a little teaser out there. But these are, for me, the most important things, the easiest things, the practical steps that you can take to help protect your organization. Now, I know that when I reviewed the participant list for who's on today's call, we've got folks from all over, which I absolutely love. And then we have folks within different roles in organizations. So we've got HR folks, we've got finance folks, we've got business owners. Regardless of your position within the organization, mitigating risk is going to be one of your key responsibilities. So we want to make sure that we're protecting ourselves and we're protecting our organizations. And absolutely, bottom line, number 1 way to do this, first thing out the gate, you need to have a decent handbook, right? That is going to be whether you are answering an EEOC claim, you are talking to employees about why you're having to terminate them, you are going through a lawsuit right now, or you're just answering one of the 8 million unemployment claims that popped up since 2020, you have to have good, solid policies. So you have to think about kind of first things first is if you do have a handbook, where did it come from? Don't just take it, you're new to the job and just, okay, well, this is what they've always done, so this is what I'm going to work with. You got to ask that why question. Why is it the way it is? because so many people just go out there and they're just grabbing stuff off the internet. And if you get something free from the internet, guess how much it's worth? Zero, because it was free, right? We don't know where that came from. We don't know if it was vetted by an employment attorney. We don't know that it contains all of the core policies that you need to have. And for those of you who are not HR folks, one of my little Meganisms that I usually say is, the most dangerous thing in HR is you don't know what you don't know. So if you don't know that you should have safe harbor language in your handbook, then you're not going to put it in there when you think you're writing a really decent handbook. You don't know what to put in. So it's important that you lean on those experts in order to make sure that it's crafted properly. You also want to make sure that it is specific to your size and state. So you don't want to have to be beholden to policies that you don't actually have to meet the requirements of. So I was working with a new client. She's only been with us a couple of weeks. And she was telling me that I asked her where she had gotten her handbook, and she says that she had stolen it from her husband's former employer. So love the ingenuity, love the spunk that you're trying to get it done, but he had come from some huge Fortune 500 company. And, that thing was like this thick, and it had all kinds of policies and procedures and requirements and FMLA that she had now put into her company's culture that only has 7 employees, right? And we know that magic number with FMLA is 50, right? 50 people in that 75-mile radius. So she doesn't have to comply with FMLA, so why would you, right? Leave yourself that wiggle room, that flexibility, and only comply with the laws that you absolutely have to. So be cognizant if you've stolen it from somewhere else, what states were they operating in? Do you have employees who are in other states that you need to make sure you bring in their requirements? So it's really key that you are specific with your handbook. Also, there's that theory of, are we going to have standalone policies? Should everything be in the handbook? I am absolutely of the mindset that everything needs to be in one singular document. When something gets updated, the whole kit and caboodle gets updated. When you have standalone policies that are here and there, people forget about them. You forget that it was written 10 years ago, and some employee shows up with some policy that you've never even read that you now have to comply with because you haven't communicated that you're no longer going to adhere to it. So keep them all together, make it easy on yourself, at least look at it once a year. But this is going to be your best defense against all of those claims that I was just talking about. Real quickly, I'm going to give a little bit of a disclaimer. So I have both current DCSI clients and non-clients on the phone. So we are going to be talking a little bit about our HR toolkit that Michelle mentioned earlier. So if I'm referencing, hey, this is where you find it in the toolkit, just to give a little bit of a disclaimer. The toolkit is our $99 per month subscription fee. And what that involves is what it includes is access to our online platform, which has the template handbook. It's got the template job descriptions. The handbook is by size and state, right? And it is vetted by an employment attorney. It's got your job descriptions. It's got how you hire people. It's got how you fire people. It's got your new hire package, again, dependent upon your state. And then you also have access to, in addition to the intellectual property, you have what I call the trifecta, which is updated policies, procedures, things that we are seeing in the courts, new laws that come out. We push those out to you twice a month. I am, as Michelle said, a self-proclaimed HR nerd. I love this stuff. It lights my fire. I'm guessing not everybody on the phone shares my passion. This is probably not how you like to spend a Saturday, right? So having some sort of a mechanism or a vehicle so that you can keep up to date with these ever-changing laws is going to be really, really important. So that's the first part of the trifecta. Second part is our training classes, which again, unlimited access to you or anyone within your organization. And then the third part, which is going to be our unlimited access to our HR hotline, which is staffed Monday through Friday, 8 to 6 with only nationally certified HR professionals. You pick up the phone, a human answers, and you can ask them any HR question you like. So as I'm referring to the toolkit, that's what I'm talking about for those of you who don't know it. So let's move on here. Second most important piece in my mind is going to be training. So there's kind of a couple of different components that I want to cover. And I skipped the first one. Here we go. So compliance training. So annual training, so we should be talking about this at least once a year. Sexual harassment prevention, DE&I, drug-free workplace, code of conduct, ADA accommodation. These are all core pieces, which again, this is what drives EEOC claims. This is what drives lawsuits. This is what drives class action problems that we don't want to have. And again, we're building this kind of program of defense, this defensibility, right? It comes in layers. So if you have someone who claims that they have been sexually harassed in your organization, right? The first thing we do is say, wait, look at all these great policies that I have in this handbook, and look where this employee signed off, right? So we say absolutely zero tolerance. We're not going to put up with it in our company. It's not going to happen. Point two, if for some reason somebody goes rogue and it does happen, then you need to come talk to your manager. You can't talk to your manager, you talk to that manager. Not comfortable talking to that manager, come talk to HR, right? We're going to conduct our investigation. We're going to do our piece. We're going to terminate or write them up or whatever we deem as appropriate, right? So that's kind of first line of defense. Second line of defense is where we say, and then we take the time to train and to talk about it and, to make sure that people understand what the requirements and our expectations are. And we do that every single year. So again, it's them, not us. It's them, not us. Their problem, not our problem. And I will tell you, for those of you who may be emailing or trying to get your kid a snack or washing dishes or something while you're listening to me, this is one of those moments that I need you to tune in. I need you to give me your full attention because each state is a little bit different. So I can't tell you across the line, everybody on this call, but certainly in the state of Florida, you can be held personally, financially responsible for sexual harassment claims. And what that means, if you are an agent of the organization, if you are a frontline supervisor, if you are a manager, if you are an HR person, if you are an owner, they can come after you, your house, your car, your 401k, whatever it is that you have, and you can be personally, financially responsible. So it's so important that we are mitigating risk not only for the organization, but for ourselves personally. So we have to take these claims really seriously. So again, circling back, defensibility, step one is going to be handbook. Step two is this is how we always talk about it. This is the training that we conduct. And it's important that you give the time so that employees understand, yes, this really is something that's important to the organization. And by devoting the time, you let them understand that these things are important to you. Now, there are two types of trainings, really. We can have our live, even though we're virtual. Today is our live class, and I'm hoping that we're going to get back to a world where we can do more in-person trainings. If you are in a place where you have returned to the workforce, you've returned to the office, you know that having that interaction of a live class with someone standing in the room is going to be more impactful than doing something like this, because I know some of you are emailing out there. I know some of you are washing dishes. It happens. I do it myself. But we want to try and capture everybody's attention as best we can on a regular basis and keep them enthralled and keep them engaged so that the information we're giving them really does sink in. And then, of course, your other option is going to be kind of an on-demand or something that's offered through what's called your LMS or your learning management system. And this is more what I call a kind of check-the-box training. So, you're live in person, you're asking questions, you're interactive. The on-demand, it can have quizzes like ours does, but this is just kind of like, hey, we said we were going to do it, we were going to review it with everybody. Typically those are much less expensive. My organization offers them, they're $10 a seat, so it's not going to break the bank. If you have never done training like this before, my recommendation is always going to be year one is going to be a live event to allow people to ask that question. Again, give that time to show the importance of the issue. And then with subsequent years, follow up with that check-the-box training because you're just reiterating information. Make sure you get it to new hires. You don't want people coming in, and they start sexually harassing people on day 30 because you haven't had a chance to train them yet. So very important that you put that structure in place. Second piece of training is going to be the importance of leadership training. So first thing you have to think about with your leaders are how are your leaders selected? Typically for most of us who have risen kind of through the leadership ranks, you're really good at something, so suddenly you become the manager of the people that do that thing, right? So you're a really good accountant, suddenly you're the head of accounting. But we know that the traits of accountants maybe are not necessarily the exact traits that we want from a manager. And apologize if there's any accountants or finance folks on the phone. I don't mean to stereotype. But again, my folks who are accountants are typically, they're very analytical. Typically, they're not extroverts. Typically, they really need a lot of data in order to make a decision, in order to feel comfortable doing that. And typically, they're not, huge on chit-chat and sharing. So again, don't mean to stereotype, but again, generally. But these types of things, these types of traits do not necessarily lend themselves to being a fabulous manager, right? Because managers have to be able to communicate readily. They have to be engaging. They have to be inspiring. Think about the best boss that you ever had, right? And then what skill set does that lend itself to? What skill set does that come from? So if that skill set is not inherently there as part of their personality, you have to teach that. You have to give them that tool, those skills, so that they can be successful in that role. So, you want to make sure that, they have that mechanism through formalized training, because if not, then you have people who are coming with you just, we've learned what we've seen, we've picked up bad habits along the way, and you're going to end up dealing with somebody else's baggage because, oh, I thought it was perfectly normal to scream at an employee and bring them to tears. Is that not how you do it here, right? We want to be proactive. We don't want to deal with a crying employee. But this is the position by far that I feel brings the most risk to the organization. It's not you folks who are sitting on the phone here today who are trying to learn more, who are trying to understand your craft better. It's not typically my business owners that get us in trouble. It's not my HR folks. It's his frontline supervisors who unfortunately just don't know any better. So we talked about, you don't know what you don't know. Supervisors are in this exact same position. So I had an organization that I was working with who got into a lawsuit a couple of years ago, and they had an employee. She was 15 to 20 minutes late every single day. Was late. The manager, frontline supervisor kept saying, well, she knows, she knows what time she's supposed to be here. I'm done with it. She's been late 7 times. I'm firing her. I'm over it, right? She turned around and sued because what he didn't do, what he should have done, is ask the question, why? Why are you always late? What is going on with you? Why can you not seem to get here on time? He didn't have that conversation, right? And it turns out that she was taking her mom to chemo treatments, which is a protected activity under the Family Medical Leave Act, but he never apprised her of her rights. He never asked that question. She could have had a medical condition, and then he would have been required to enter into that interactive process, right, where we have a conversation and say, well, gosh, do you need an accommodation for this medical condition? Maybe it's not a big deal if you come in 15 minutes late. Maybe I can shift your schedule back. How about if you work the night shift? Whatever that accommodation can be, he didn't ask the question. So it's really important that we provide training to managers, not so that they understand the intricacies of the laws as well as the people who are sitting on this phone do, but it's important that they have the red flag training. That's what I call it. You just have to know enough to have a buzzer go off in your head and say, I need to pick up the phone and call Megan. I think this might be something that's going to be a covered activity. This might be something that's protected. Help me understand what more we need to do. They don't have to have all the intricacies, but they need to have that buzzer that goes off that says, I need to loop in HR. I need to loop in my business owner. We need more help on this. I don't need to make this decision unilaterally. Okay. Pay compression. So this is huge and hot right now. I'm working with 2 to 3 different clients right now on projects specifically about pay compression. And essentially, there has been a huge increase in the rise of local and state minimum wages. I know in the state of Florida, we just recently went through one, passed in November. Everybody got a little bit of a jump in January, and then we are actually going through a second increase in September of this year, so we get to $10 an hour. And then we're going to hit $1 an hour every single year through 2026 to get us to be $15 an hour. And, I know this is part of the national conversation, and I have clients who agree with it, and I have clients who don't agree with it. But at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what you think. At the end of the day, if it passes, this is no longer a political issue. This is a compliance issue. And so if it's the law, it's the law, and we're just going to have to suck it up and do what we have to do, right? But the important thing here that I want you to take away when we talk about mitigating risk is getting ahead of this, right? So look at where you are now. What is the minimum wage where you are currently? What is it anticipated to be? What type of, kind of activity have you heard? What are the rumblings in your area? And again, you have to look not only at the state minimum wage, but also any kind of local laws as well. So you have to look at a couple of different things. The first one is going to be what they call compression, right? So we have somebody who's currently making $10 an hour, but we know they're going to have to make $15 an hour in the next couple of years, right? Well, we already have somebody making $15 an hour, right? They're higher up in the organization. They have a different job. So if this person starts to come up and starts to make $15 an hour, what are we going to do with these people, right? So compression is not really so much these people down here. It's these people up here, because we want them to continue to feel valued in the organization. And we want them to be able to say, it's important to me. I know my job is valued. And, you also have to think about, because I know a lot of people will say, oh, well, they don't, not everybody knows what everybody makes. That's not true anymore, okay? Absolutely not. One, it's all over the press, right? Everybody knows what's going on. And then two, we're working with different generations. So our boomers and even some of our Xers, we're not comfortable talking about how much money they made. That is absolutely not the case with our millennials and our Gen Z kids. They have absolutely no problem saying, well, I make $11 an hour. How much do you make, right? And so we're trying to get more towards pay transparency. And P.S., there's a law around that, the National Labor Relations Act. You can't stop people from talking about their pay, so make sure you don't do that. But we're trying to kind of get to this feeling of pay transparency because in theory, you should be able to justify if people are making more or less than other folks, right? So the two issues, again, we've got kind of that compression, that squish issue that I was just talking about. And then the other piece is the recruiting and retaining top talent. So I'm working with an organization right now. They're, more of a blue collar place. They have the $10 an hour folks, and those are hard, hot jobs that work outside in Florida in August. And for those of you who do not know what Florida in August is like, it is miserable, and working outside is very, very difficult. But, if you're trying to recruit and retain talent to work outside in August in the state of Florida and it's only paying $10 an hour, and the Walmart Supercenter down the street is paying $18 an hour, and you get to work in air conditioning, and you get breaks, and you get all kinds of things that this person isn't offering, you have to think about, again, not only internal equity but external equity as well, right? Because the person who, again, maybe it's not necessarily the same skill set, but why would I work $10 an hour and kill myself when I can work $18 an hour at Walmart? So you have to be cognizant of all of that. You have to be mindful. You have to be prepared and ready for that. So looking ahead, it's also really important that you understand what the job is worth, right? So it's not necessarily, what's Megan worth or, what's Michelle worth, but it's what is the position worth within the market. So I recommend you do a compensation study. I love every year. Usually that's not in the budget, so every other year would be great. Get somebody third party, get somebody objective who can come in with absolutely no skin in the game and make recommendations. Do not go to salary.com. This is another one of these pay attention moments if you're doing something else. Salary.com is employee-funded information, which means that it is not completely accurate, right? It is also not an apples-to-apples comparison. And I don't know how many people on the line, feel free to use the chat function if you have been in my shoes, but you have employees who walk in the door and they slide that piece of paper across the desk and they say, oh, well, I'm making $50,000 a year, but salary.com says I should be making $75,000. And then I look at it and I'm like, okay, well, salary.com says that you should be doing all of my budgets and forecasting when right now you're doing my accounts receivable. So this is not a good comparison, right? So make sure you use somebody credible, use valid information, and use employer-based information. This is where you get a true analysis. Sorry, it's my salary.com soapbox. Okay. 4, state and local laws. So this is probably, if we look at trends in the past 10 years in HR, this is where I have seen probably the biggest shift is the number of individual state and local laws that have popped up. The municipalities is just unbelievable. Anybody that is on the phone from California knows exactly what I'm talking about, because we will have a leave law in San Diego and a leave law in Los Angeles and a leave law in San Francisco and then a California leave law, and they're all different. So it's really important that you understand not only where you are, where the organization is based, but if you have employees in other areas, right, that you're complying with all of that. And my HR Toolkit folks know we're pushing that information out to you twice a month, so that's not how you're spending your Saturdays. But things to think about that are rapidly changing: drug testing, especially medical marijuana, what individual protected categories, you should know those. So in the state of Florida, for example, HIV or AIDS status, sickle cell anemia are both protected traits. We're seeing more trending towards discrimination laws. Hair is really important right now. So you may have heard of the Crown Act, which is an acronym for creating a respectful, open world for natural hair. And basically, this is a law that prohibits discrimination based on a person's hair texture or style, if that style or texture is commonly associated with a particular race or national origin. So we're seeing more of these laws of discrimination come to play. So it's really important that you're staying on top of it and you have a mechanism for that. And then, of course, our leave laws are also kind of all over the map and ever-changing. So job descriptions, I'm going to move through relatively quickly here. I know we're getting short on time. See, this is why I can only do 7 things, because I talk too much. So job descriptions, most important, least sexy piece of HR. I've been doing this a long time. I've talked to a lot of HR folks in my day, and nobody has ever come up to me and said, Megan, I just love writing job descriptions. It's what, it's what does it for me. It's my favorite part of my job, right? Nobody enjoys this, people. We get it. We understand it. It still has to be done, right? How do you hire for a job if you don't know what the job is? How do you pay somebody properly for the job if you don't know what the job is? How do you do performance management on the job if you don't know what the job is? And you certainly can't terminate a person for not doing the job if you don't know what the job is, right? So we have to have this outlined. So solid job descriptions, you need to have essential functions. What are the requirements of that job? What are the have-to-haves of that individual position? KSAs are your knowledge, skills, and abilities. So this is your education, this is your experience, these are your certifications. What knowledge do you need to bring to the position in order to be successful? And then something around physical requirements. So we have some ADA requirements met. So we need to have the physical attributes and requirements of the job as well. Be cognizant of length. My personal sweet spot for a job description is somewhere between 2 to 3 pages. I prefer 2. I have clients who give me 9-page job descriptions. Okay, we don't need a 9-page job description. You do not need to list everything under the sun that could ever possibly happen to that job. What we do when we have these crazy number of pages job description is we box ourselves in, right? So we don't want that. We want some wiggle room. We want some opportunity there to be able to say, hey, can you help out and can you do this, right? That all other duties is required that we all love to put at the end of job descriptions. But you don't want somebody coming to you and waving that 9-page job description in your face and saying, this isn't in my job description, so I'm not going to do it, right? So give yourself some breathing room. Give yourself some wiggle room there. And it's important that it's not a stagnant document that lives on some HR drive somewhere. Bring it out at the hiring process, during the interview process. Bring it out on day one. Have that employee sign it at the bottom that they understand what the requirements of the job are. It needs to be part of your annual performance review process. Maybe the job's changed over the past year. That's a great time to review it and make sure that it's still accurate. Make sure the employee still agrees with everything in there. If not, then you talk about it. But it's a living document that should be changing as the job changes. And again, making sure that you're looking at them at least annually in some way, shape, or form. So performance management, I know we're getting short on time. I'm going to try and move through this one quickly. Twofold. One, you need to have some sort of an annual process. I'm personally, the shift in the trend in the HR world has gone to quarterly. Fortune 500 companies are doing this monthly. Tech companies are doing this weekly. It doesn't have to be the huge mamma jamma that it used to be, where we had, the 10 or 15 pages of a performance review. It can be 1 page. It can be 2 pages. Don't make it overly difficult. The point is the process, right, that you're going through. You're providing, feedback to an employee. They're providing feedback to you. It's that conversation. That's what you want to have. And then when we talk about performance management in the more kind of traditional way of underperforming employees, going through that process, having the verbal, the written, the final is very important. Documenting stuff is very important. But at the end of the day, the best way to mitigate, EEOC charges, lawsuits, unemployment claims, all of these things that we're dealing with is having the guts to have what I call the conversation. And this is typically where we get into trouble, right? Because just like my manager that I was mentioning before, we're ticked off, we don't say anything. We're ticked off, we don't say anything. We're ticked off, we don't say anything. And then you tick me off and I blow up and I'm picking up the HR helpline saying, Megan, I want to fire this person. I'm so over them. And I say, well, have you talked to him? Have you documented it? What do you have for documentation, right? Because we have to be able to say, we have to be able to come back and prove that we had these conversations. It can't be a he said, she said. We have to document that. But at the end of the day, employees have, typically a very low level of self-actualization, which is my very fancy way of saying, I think I'm awesome, right? I think I'm awesome, and I think I walk on water, and everything that I do is absolutely phenomenal. So if you're going to come to an employee and say you're not awesome, then you got to start chipping away at that, right? You got to start getting in there and saying, well, you're not awesome, but you could be, right? Here are the tools that you need in order to be awesome. Oh, you're still not awesome. You're really, you're falling short. But you need to have the conversation finally, when you get to that final, hey, we've done our process. We're not doing it anymore. Not mean language, not curt language. Don't get angry about it, but just very plain words so that people understand, if you keep down this road, I'm going to fire you. You know, you will not work here anymore unless we can get this corrected. So using very plain, simple language so that they understand, because what happens is we do the ticked off, don't say anything, ticked off, don't say anything, ticked off, don't say anything, and then we terminate the people. And because I think I'm awesome, right, and nobody's ever told me I'm not, people jump to these horrible conclusions that I'm terminated because I'm a woman, I'm terminated, you know, because I'm over 40, I'm terminated for my medical condition, whatever that is. We want to be able to chip away at that so that they know they're going to be terminated. They see that coming. And that's how we mitigate our risk. And then our final piece, I know I'm right at 12:30, so I'm going to talk super fast here. COVID-related issues, guidance, leave laws. The biggest thing you can do here is just provide consistency across all employees. So if you're paying, if you're not paying, if you're getting the tax credits, if you're providing ADA accommodation, making sure that you're doing that in a consistent way. This is all untested in the courts. We're all in uncharted territory. So we're going to have to see what shakes out. The best thing you can do to protect yourself is to provide that consistency. You know, again, if you're a Toolkit subscriber, I'm pushing it out to you, but make sure that you are up on what the CDC, the IRS, OSHA, and the Department of Labor are telling us to do in order to be successful. So again, just real quickly, for those of you who are not subscribers, a little bit more information on our toolkit, and our website also has some more complimentary trainings if you want to jump out there. We're very excited about our new partnership with JER. And Michelle, do you want to tell a little bit about how we're partnering with the Culture Index Survey as well?
Absolutely. We have basically added on to your subscription. So for those of you who already are subscribers, for an additional $50 per month, you have access to an annual tool called the Culture Index Survey. And it's a tool that you can basically ask 10 questions to understand the health and well-being of your organization. I'm sorry that my yellow lab is like reached his limit of how much time we can be on these webinars today. So for more information, reach out to Megan or Dana or myself, and we'd be happy to tell you more about it. I would just want to say thank you, Megan. You know, each time I got a chance to hear it 3 times. The first time was a little bit rocky on my internet connection, but you power pack that half hour. You're right. You are such a wealth of knowledge. And I hope all of you who do want to keep your organization out of trouble, reach out to Megan and utilize her expertise. She's going to stay on afterwards. So if you have any other questions that didn't get answered, feel free to stay on. We invite you to stay in touch. Join us for our monthly webinar series. And if you go out to DCSI's website, they too have a wonderful schedule of complimentary webinars. Next month, I'm going to be presenting the 5 behaviors of a virtual team. And in June, we're going to have Larry Beers talking about how to reward and compensate your employees. Again, thank you for joining us today. Megan, again, we appreciate and getting to know you and your many talents that you have. If when you finish the webinar, if you'd be so kind to give her some feedback, give her some praise on what you learned from her, questions that she can help you with. And we also want to know what your upcoming challenges are.